so you've had your coffee and you've had your lunch yet?
Yes.
Okay, never mind. Because I haven't, but that's okay. I just have this coffee. And the reason I'm here, as Judith has introduced me, is that I went on exchange program, a study of environmental journalism in City U London last year. It was a long time ago. And then I learned something from there, from the very brief one semester course. And then here I'd like to share some of my experiences of dealing with environmental journalism, or just in general what I've learned from the whole trip. And here you can see the title here is An Idealistic and Practical How-To Guide and a Personal Story. Well, during my time at City of London, I had a few assignments, and then I wrote a few blog posts for my blog, and then I also wrote something for the young reporter that I was working for. And I'm going to start it with a story. And then it's a story that I posted just a couple of days ago. I posted a message on my Facebook talking about the glorious moment when you intentionally get on the second bus when two buses of the same route arrive, and it overtakes the first bus a few stops down the road. And then I say, science, baby, science. Well, what does it have to do with my presentation, my sharing, and what I've learned in London? You'll know very soon. So it was a dark and stormy night in Jordan, and I was waiting for a bus to arrive. That would take me to HKU where my girlfriend studies. And then when I was waiting, it was a very, very long wait. And 20 minutes later, this happens. Boom, a bus arrives. And then I thought, at last, here comes a bus. But as I prepared to pick up my stuff on the ground and then get on the bus, this happened. Well, the same bus came. I mean, what do? The same bus came. So to many of you, I think this doesn't really matter. I mean, whichever bus you board, it's going to bring you to destination, to bring you to see wherever you want to see. But then to me, it's a decision that I have learned to make, and then a great decision that I've made that I'm still very proud of today. I was the first one in line, and then I was the first one that will board the first bus. But then I didn't board the first bus. I waited until the first bus is gone, and then I board the second bus. And you know the rest of the story, that is, my bus overtook the first bus and then brought me to my destination a few minutes earlier than the first bus. So why this is happening, I was wondering. It was no miracle or no luck, it was pure science. It is a phenomenon called bunching. That is, buses of the same number coming in pairs, or in the worst case scenarios, coming in threes. It's very rampant in cities like London, Toronto, or New York, where public transportation is heavily relied upon. And then the very bad side of the bunching is that it aggravates traffic and then air pollution and produces very grumpy passengers. Well, so we don't want to see that. But I was wondering, why do buses come in threes? Perhaps they're lonely. That's one theory suggested by an online commentator, and then I quoted it on the article I wrote for the Young Reporter and for my blog. But it's definitely not the explanation. The explanation is very scientific. Well, imagine that buses were originally set off equally spaced, and then buses only start to bunch when one bus is delayed and shortening the gap between it and the other one behind it. As time goes by, more passengers accumulate at bus stops down the road. And having more passengers to pick up means that the already delayed bus has to stop longer to pick up the extra passengers. The next bus, after the late bus, will in turn gradually become more and more ahead of schedule, and then catching up with the delayed bus. And finally, the two buses meet, and then bunching occurs. That is the science behind bunching. But how did I find out? When I was studying in London, bunching happens all the time. And I'm going to show you two photos I took just on a random day. You can see there are two buses. The first bus is the 243, and then there are two of them. And the second photo, well, the bus 38 showing the same frame. And this happens all the time in London. Two buses of the same number coming to the station, and then the first one is always so crowded, and then the one behind it is sometimes pretty much empty. So, that was the beginning of the journey, of my journey to find out the reason behind bus bunching and then how London, the city, managed to deal with the problem. There are a lot of areas in environmental journalism. For example, well, air pollution, biodiversity, cancer, children's health, food safety, disaster, and then economics, ethics, water supply, waste management, blah, blah, blah. There's so many areas of environmental journalism that if you want to pursue a career in journalism, you probably will get in touch with some of these subjects. And also transportation. And all of those topics concern how people live in and interact with the non-human world. So, if you want the next generation to live on this planet as happy as you do, you have to maintain a sustainable development and maintain an environment that is not so worse than it was when you were born. I have this one fantastic example of environmental journalism. It's done by the Associated Press in 2011, and it's an investigation of the aging nuclear plants in the United States. The conclusion of the investigation found out that regulators have been working closely with nuclear power industry to keep the nation's aging reactors operating within safety standards by repeatedly weakening those standards or simply failing to enforce them. Well, you can check out the story if you want with your computer later. And this is a very fascinating, long-form, very long story that chronicles the whole issue from the government level, from the individual level, to the outcome of those failed regulations. And investigative journalism in environmental journalism is a very popular and very important form of journalism. And then it's characterized by investigation. And investigation means that you want to find out something that people really, really don't want you to find out. And very often it's some bad thing that happened to people, some bad thing that organizations, governments, or individuals, or companies do that harms the government. Another fantastic example is an explanatory journalism done by the New York Times 3 years ago. It's a multimedia series called Temperature Rising. It is an 8-piece series, very, very long and very detailed, but very updated. They cover the ongoing issue of climate change and including impacts of politics and the warming of the planet, how it affects the food supplies of the planet. But explanatory journalism is very different from investigative. It tries to make a very, very big but important issue understandable to the general public, such as global warming. There are numerous studies, there are numerous sources to quote, there are a lot of different people saying different things. So in this case, New York Times correspondents explain the issue in great detail that everybody can understand the issue and raise the public's attention and drive more media critics and then media attentions, and finally it drives changes. But before you go to the US and win Pulitzer Prizes with these stories, well, this is a simple flowchart that you have to, a tip that I'll give you to get Pulitzer Prize, which is study journalism and then do something and win the prize. But what is the something in the middle? So this is the lecturer when I was studying at City U, and then she's a writer for The Guardian and an activist and author of a book called The Protester Handbook that talk about how protesters protest. And the strikers at the dock probably can use it. And she's a visiting lecturer in environmental specialism. of the CityU, and then I've learned a lot from her. At the weekly classes taught by this lecturer, I've learned from the practical side of reporting a lot of environment-related issues, and from a very practical side, I mean, how to get to the sources, how to get those news, and how to present those news. And I think I kind of translated what I've learned in London to make it still relevant in Hong Kong. Because I mean, the government structure in UK is very different from that of Hong Kong. So this is what I found. How to find news. The most popular ways I've listed here is, well, you can get news because editors assign you news, or it randomly comes to your mind, or perhaps you can scroll through the news of the day, or just simply look at what other reporters write about. But these are not the real solutions. The first thing, the most fundamental theory that I've learned to get great news is to know your beat and be an expert of the subject. Here I got two headlines here. The first one is air pollution raises risk of lung cancer, and the second one is pollution tied to baby brain defects. And what I'm trying to do here is to ask you to, well, if you are the editor of a newspaper and you get you only got the space for one story to publish on a cover. And provided that these news broke at the same time, which one will you put on the front page? How do you decide? And that illustrates the importance of knowledge of a subject before you can write great news about it. Because if you do not know that, air pollution has long been a known correlation with lung cancer, you may think that it is a more exciting, more important news than the second one, which is actually a more recent, more surprising finding. And because news is very often surprises presented to readers, and surprises are something that readers do not know. So you have to know, a reporter's job is to know what the audience already know, so they can expect, and so they can present the news that the reporter thinks the audience doesn't know. So that is the first thing of acquiring the ability to find important and influential news about the environment, to be very knowledgeable about the issue. For example, if you want to write a great story about air pollution, you have to know every development in air pollution, every study about air pollution, and every update of news about government's policies, etc. Because if you don't know what has happened before and what people are expecting, you don't know what is surprising to them. And the second part of my presentation goes to the practical side of finding news. And if you want to find news, there are a lot of sources that are relevant, and you can just get to the source and get the news from there. For example, very often local newspapers in Hong Kong get the news from government departments. For example, the EPD, which is the Environmental Protection Department, or the AFCD, the Agriculture, Fisheries, and Conservation Department. There are a lot of government departments that has to do with the environment. And you know what? They release the new releases, they release the press releases on their website every once in a while, and then they make news. And probably the second most popular group of sources is from environmental groups. For example, Greenpeace or WWF. And a lot of local groups like Clean Air Network has been making news all over the past few years. And then, for example, like Friends of the Earth, and then some Victoria Harbour Protection Group kind of thing. They have a lot to want to tell to the people of Hong Kong, and they want media attention. So if you get to the center of those sources, you get the news. The other source of news comes from scholars. For example, from universities, think tanks, or consultancies. Because people do research and they want to publish it. And once they publish it, they want more people to read it. So they rely on the media as a gateway to reach a wider audience. So if you monitor the relevant departments of different universities, and then you keep keep an eye on it every day, you'll get an update of the latest researches, and then you can break the news about them. Another very popular sources are from the legislators. Because legislators are voted, half of the legislators in Hong Kong are voted by voters, and then they get in touch with voters very often. And the voters raise the issue to the legislators, which raise the issue in the legislature, and then discuss it, or maybe make a law or two about it. So if you check out legislature's database, and then there are specific groups that target the environment, you get a lot of news out of it. And last but not least, the most popular sources also include polluters and victims of pollutions. Well, the last one is very easy to understand. If you are a sufferer of light pollution, you want people to know about it, you want some change. So you want to contact the media, you want to talk to the reporter from Apple Daily to make it to the cover story, and then people will deal with it. So people who make those pollution will be scared, and the public's pressure will make them do something. And the other source of news is the polluters. But that is different from most other sources. Good polluters don't want you to find out that they have polluted. So you want to get to the source in their geographical location. For example, if you want to find out if a factory has polluted a river, or whether nuclear plants may have polluted the whole area, you go to the nuclear plant. And then you anticipate the pollutions and then go to the source. There you can observe whether there is some news there, and then you'll find a lot of great news if you're lucky. So this is the guide to get those news. But I call them Mission Impossible. Why? If you check those websites every day, scan through every article every morning, or simply if you're rich, you can hire people read it for you and then explain it to you every day. That is the best case scenario, because you have the time, you have the resources to update yourself with all the news updates about the environment. But that is impossible. But the mission possible, which was what I've learned from CityU, was you find ways to make the news reach you. You can subscribe to newsletters, you can follow newsmakers on social media, which is, I think, one of the most powerful tools now for journalists in recent years. If you follow, because, well, the theory is very simple, because you're not the best journalist in the world, and there are more journalists that are more knowledgeable about the environment, about environmental issues better than you. If you follow the latest update, you get the insight that the other people don't have if they don't follow the pioneer of those environmental journalists. And the last but not least, there is something amazing called the Google Alert. Has anyone heard about the Google Alert? Google Alert. Well, this is something that you have to know, and it kind of saves my life every day. Google Alert is something that's very simple. You put in some keyword that you are very interested in. For example, if I'm interested in some notorious factory polluters, for example, Brian Yap, I don't want to see every news about this notorious polluters every day without having to check out every website on the internet or every newspaper you can get your hands on. So I can just set up a Google Alert, I type in the keyword Brian Yap, and select the category of the alert, news, and then I'll get a daily update of any article related to Brian Yap in my email inbox. So, for example, what I'm doing here is I'm very interested in what foreign media in Hong Kong or foreign media in the United States care about Hong Kong. So I set up some Google Alert about some keyword like Hong Kong, and maybe if I'm interested in the art, I will write Hong Kong art, and I specify the site from, for example, the New York Times. And then every time New York Times uploads new articles about Hong Kong that contains the keyword art, I will get an email update immediately, and then I'll be the most I'll get the latest news, I get the latest insights that will help me make decisions on what stories to write and what stories are relevant. And there is this honorary mention that is finding news from other reporters. Because every reporter has to get their news from somewhere. And then if they don't cite them, they don't have the authority and nobody trusts them. So this is one way to find out where people get their news. You can look online on reputable news agencies to check where to read their environment-related stories and then see where they get the news. For example, the department that they get the news from, or the people they quote, or the organization that they get the new finding from. These are very useful resources that you can make a database of, and then you can find very useful in the future. Because then you know what organizations are willing to talk to the reporter, and then what government agencies will release figures that relates to the environment. So this is this is, I think, one of the most useful tools and one of the easiest way that you can get a sense of how media works, how professional works in the environmental journalism area. So, quick recap. So what I've learned from CDU, from the EJ course, was the first thing, to be a great journalist or a great environmental journalist, you have to be curious. For example, in my bus bunching case, the story I wrote wouldn't be possible if I was not interested in the phenomenon of buses coming in threes. And then if I am not curious, there would be no story. And then the second point is to be an expert. Make yourself an expert. You can do a lot of researches, you can do a lot of interviews to get to know what it really is, what the norm is in society that people expect. Because if you don't know that buses coming in threes is abnormal, there is no news. And the third and the fourth, I think, is very important points of being a great journalist is to find the news and let the news find you. Now get back to bunching. The article I wrote about bunching led me to the conclusion that bus companies in London, they have done a lot of things to improve the bunching situation. And in London, most buses are installed with GPS that track the exact location of the buses on the road. And then people will use those information available online and then turn them into like smartphone applications, so passengers can check every time they leave their home to see where the bus is and whether they should wait at this bus stop or the next one, or take another route. And this way, people can expect the traffic, people can expect an estimated time that it takes to work, and then use the public transportation more efficiently. And then the last one that the bus company did was to educate bus drivers about bunching, and then to tell them how to deal with the phenomenon, how to deal with the situation if they find another bus of the same number in front of them. So these are the solutions that London has done, and then it's widely believed that they are effective. And then here are some advice for you as a passenger. What you can do to minimize the delays in bus, which causes bunching, is to move inside the bus and make way to the doors not long before exiting. And then, most importantly, if a crowded bus arrives at a stop after long waiting time, do not get on the first bus, because very probably the empty vehicles are coming just behind it, and then that will ultimately overtake the first bus. So that is an advice for you if next time you see buses coming in threes or twos in Hong Kong. And that I have proved works. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions, anybody? Have you got some questions for Alan?
Questions, welcome. Yep.
You have a slide on the shading box
Yeah.
just clarify it. That is how you collect. Is it negative and positive examples of collecting stories? Is it?
Well, this is calling listening possible because it is not wrong for it's kind of effective and comprehensive if you can do all these missions impossible. But then in reality we can't because we don't have so much time. We have to go to work, we have to write a lot of articles, and we still have to keep up with all the updates. That's nearly impossible. And I think most people here just read one newspaper in the morning. And then there are a lot of different other news from different sources that we want to know, but we don't have the time to read through every one of them. So that's why I made this mission possible, is to make them really convenient and to make the news come to you. For example, does anyone use RSS? I mean, RSS, if you subscribe to different RSS, and then you can read all the new updates in just one RSS reader. It's super convenient, and if you haven't started using RSS yet, I strongly advise that you do, because every time I think most newspapers have those RSS feeds, and if you subscribe to it, they will notify you once there is any update. It's sort of like Google Alerts, but topic-based and not keyword-based. So, if you can do Mission Impossible, or just part of those Mission Impossible, that is fine. If you have the time, you can keep up with every news that you can get your hands on. But if you can't, these are the compromises and then still very effective solutions that you can have to keep up with the news updates of a particular subject.
Any more questions?
I kind of missed who the lady was. Did you mention? I missed that.
Yeah, this is the she's called Bibi Van der Zee, and she writes about a very wide range of subjects, and she's very into environment and activism. So when she was there, she taught me a lot of practical ways to learn about how to get the news, how a real media professional get the news, and then get it in the most efficient and professional way. I remember that I think a year before my exchange, she was also the lecturer, and then she taught a lot about science.
Yes.
But then during my exchange, she didn't teach a lot about sciences, but instead she taught a lot of real-life experience of reporting about environmental-related issues in London, such as which department to contact if you want some quotes, and which sources are the most popular and most influential ones that every journalist should keep an eye on, things like that. And then I think that has not only taught me about doing news in environmental related issues, but also as a journalist in general.
Did she send you out to do the bus bunching story, or was that just, or did that come out of this course?
Yes, I actually wrote an article, and then it's on my blog.
I know somebody told me you did it for TYR, right? And,
Yeah.
but did that come out of this course? Did she help you?
Yes. I mean, the development of this story idea, I talked to her, and then she gave me a lot of advice of where to find those bus drivers who are willing to talk, like from the unions, or how bus companies here work, and the government structure of managing transportation. Yeah, that's very practical and hands-on.
But why is that an environmental story?
Well, I think it's...
What's the environmental aspect? I can see
Yeah.
aspects, but it seems the way you did it was more like a personal story about, how to catch the bus in a clever way. But what's the environmental aspect of it?
The environmental aspect, I think in the actual article, I think I quoted some researchers from bunching that talked a bit about why bunching is aggravating the city's traffic, and then which leads to more pollution and inefficient transportation. I think that is, well, that's not directly related to the exhaustion of pollutants, but then it is still a great part of urban development, which is very much related to sustainable development and the living of all people in a city without killing each other. So I think that is a very interesting but kind of a feature story about the environment that has the side that really interests an everyday passenger bus and public transportation.
Did she talk about other environmental stories in Britain or where she didn't have a Dutch name, but anywhere else?
Yeah, she talked a bit about, she compared a bit about different countries in mostly in Europe, and how different things work, how different government departments coordinate their actions regarding environmental issues, which departments are responsible for cleanups after like an oil spill. So there's no oil spill, but some cleanup stuff in the UK or in Europe, and it's very hands-on. And then because a lot of the exchange, a lot of the students in our class are Britons, and there are some European students, so I think they also find it very interesting and practical. But I, as an outsider, I don't really have any idea of the department and how the government works. So I kind of had a hard time understanding the relations between the different departments. But I still, there are a lot of great material to read. And then in this presentation, I translated it to Hong Kong related departments, and then those Hong Kong based organizations that I think you may find helpful in the near future.
In the past, they were taken to Parliament to listen to debates on environmental issues. Did you go to Parliament to
I
listen?
did not,
No.
but I went to some district
Oh,
meetings
okay.
about, I think,
District Council?
yeah, district council
Yeah.
in London. I forgot the name of the place. It's something. That's like every place in
Right,
London.
almost
I don't
every
know.
place ends in London.
Yeah. No, I think it's in Camden Town. It's in Camden.
Town.
Yeah, in Camden.
Town.
Camden, yeah. There is a district council meeting about some really local areas where some people, some citizens complained about some company's pollution near their home. And after that, you kind of have to roll a very basic news piece about the meeting and the outcome of it. Yeah.
So you did go to some local discussion about some activism. Yeah, that's good. Any other questions for Alan?
Yeah, you said that the role of an environmental journalist is not only to investigate but also to collect information, etc. So, in this extent, what is the difference then, according to you, between academics who publish scholars and journalists who publish articles about environmental issues?
I think that has to do with there are a lot of different types of journalism, and then especially these days, a lot of journalists do not simply write articles. Sometimes they collect a lot of information and then turn them into interactive graphics that tells a visual story. But sometimes it's very, very effective and very, very attractive to a common reader, and that is very eye-opening and especially a very impressive and very effective way of communication in these days. I think, well, for an investigative journalist, his task is very, very simple, to dig up what people don't want other people to know that is harmful to other people. And for a journalist whose job is to collect information and to maybe to collect all those information and explain them to readers, their job is different. They're trying to make sense of a very, very big issue that otherwise wouldn't be very easily understandable. I think that is the difference between an investigative journalist or journalists of different functions.
See, I'm very interested in doing some news reporting on small, tiny neighborhoods in and around Hong Kong. But usually, more often than not, news articles may not lead me or direct me to those neighborhoods. But in your opinion, what would you do if you were to look for some juicy information on maybe local neighborhoods in Hong Kong? I'm sorry.
I think, well, you said you were interested in local neighborhood. What made you interested in it?
Well, because they don't usually appear in the typical newspaper. And let's say I was interested in doing some news reporting on maybe some recent phenomenon or something happening in a very tiny neighborhood, in new territories. But because usually news, at least big news, do not come from small neighborhoods. But what would you recommend that I do?
I think it'd be much easier if you can identify the problem first. Because maybe if you can identify that there are some pollutions in a small neighborhood or people that complain about the pollutions, that you can definitely go to the source. But if you just sense, if it's just your news judgment that tells you that there is something fishy happening in the neighborhood, there's something bad happening there, well, it's very simple. Just go to the neighborhood and then to do a journalist's job to observe what's happening in the neighborhood and talk to the neighbors, talk to people in the neighborhood. I think it's kind of the oldest way of getting information across.
But what
Just
about-
talk to people and then to know their worries, to know their concerns, and then to see to determine the scale of the issue and then whether it needs to be broadcast to the whole nation or just in a local town newspaper. And I think, well, in Hong Kong, I think it's very unlikely that there is a tiny neighborhood that has never been reported before.
Mm.
But in that case, I think any new stuff, any new problem that you discover, if it's very important and significant, it can make great news, even that is even very influential on a national or international scale.
Any more questions for Alan? Rachel, is that asking a question? No. Putting your hand up, so maybe we can check. Anybody's got a question? Okay, all right, well, let's finish there. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thank you.
That's really good. That will go onto the website. I'll show you afterwards where it will be, and you can visit it there if you want to take a look.
And this is my blog about
okay.
about a tour that I call it the green and black in the music. And then I wrote a couple articles. For example, the bunching buses, or well, a thief in my bicycle, and then some electric vehicles, and the cycling culture in London. Yeah, you can visit it. The address is tur.hk/London. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's have 10 minutes break then, and maybe you guys will go with the equipment, and we'll come back at 20 to 4. Thanks a lot. And